Welcome to Tuesday nights Fish Tales by the Fire with the Bull Experience. And we have the epic Donkey Tales. What's going on, Epic?
Well, I'm not on the water, unfortunately, because I'd really rather be on the water right now. I made a short today, and it really got me all excited about going again, and I don't even know when the next time I'll be able to go.
Yeah, I'm off for a week. We got fall break. So
Nice. Nice. So I suppose the first epic tale I will tell is probably one of the most unbelievable ones, but yet I was there and I know the real story, and I want to tell the real story. And it is the story of the giant yellow cat, the biggest flathead I've ever seen in my life. And no, I didn't catch it. I wish I had.
well, for being the story, I am submitting this for the approval. Fish Tales by the Fire is your floor, Mr. Epic Catfish.
All right. So how many people do we have in here, Kelly? Has
We have
everybody made it in yet?
13. We have 13 already.
13.
Yep.
So let's field some questions before that. If anybody's got any questions, anybody's got any comments, any whatever, because I'd like to not have to repeat this at all because it's kind of long and entangled.
So far nothing. Everybody's just saying hi to everybody right now.
So who do we got?
We've got, well, you know who was always first one in line, always. Avid fisherman. He was in earlier. James Kirkpatrick was in.
Captain Kirk.
Yep. Catfish Cameron.
Catfish Cameron.
Sunfish Assassin. God Soldier was in.
Mr. Assassin and God Soldier. You know, Kelly, it's some of my favorite people on the whole board already.
Hooks and Hammocks.
Hooks and Hammocks. Oh, yeah. Outstanding.
Roger with Muskrat.
Roger. And, you know, I talked to Roger on the phone, and I know I haven't told him this story. This is something I don't tell very often.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kelly.
Yeah. Yes,
how's
sir.
Your fire going? I can't hardly see it.
It's going good. If everybody wants to see it, let me pull it up on screen real quick.
There you go.
There you go. And y'all can see my little girl off to the side of there. She's hanging out.
That's outstanding.
So we got 20 people in the house. So it's up to you. If you want to say little or you want to be the fire pit,
It doesn't matter. You can switch back and forth. I love fires. There's no doubt. And who doesn't? Who doesn't? I got a friend of mine that I call the fire marshal because, you know, when we used to go camping, that's the 100% thing he was concerned with. I mean, he's going in the woods and cutting everything down. He's got a thing of fire, and he's got the fire that you can add more light. He's got the fire, you know, the firewood that'll last longer. And he's still the same way.
Yeah. Right, Tim Molina says, "Is this bring your own furs?"
Bring your own what?
Furs.
Oh, okay.
I guess you have or bring your own. Bring your fire. I think bring fire. That's what he's talking about. Bring your own fire. Yeah.
I thought about starting one, but dueling fires wouldn't work very good.
We got I'm gonna switch, and there you go. We got Eric Burns, Jody, Pontoon Jody's in here.
Pontoon Jody.
J Dog's in the house.
J Dog.
Dale Hayslip, Brian B.
Dale and Brian B. Puppy heads. All right. So I suppose
Miss Becca and P City's in here.
Becca and P City. Awesome. Good.
Yeah.
We got a good audience to tell this story.
Oh, yeah. We got 22 in the house.
So this story is it's kind of near and dear to my heart because it was at least 30 years ago. And I actually had my first boat before I had a driver's license. And, you know, I've been sick with fishing ever since I was little. You know, and it didn't matter if it had a fin, I wanted to catch it. But my favorite one, of course, was catfish. And I just didn't know that much about them. Caught a lot of bass, caught a lot of sunfish. I went with my parents on camping trips that lasted 2 weeks. You know, because my dad, he worked for the state, and instead of paying him extra money, you know, for raises, they just kept giving him more time off. And we would go and visit my grandparents down at Lake Shelbyville, and they had basically just made the lake. I think it was in 78 or 79, but they made it on the Kaskaskia River, which was known all the way back 100 years ago for giant flatheads. And the Kaskaskia, if nobody knows, it kind of runs through south central Illinois, and it's been a flathead habitat river since people have actually settled here. It goes into the Mississippi River, so the genetics, of course, of the catfish are directly from the Mississippi River. But they put 2 dams on it. They put Shelbyville Dam, and then they put it's that one, Carlisle. It's a lot closer to Abbott. And so my parents would take me down there, and we would fish below the dam at least one time. And we didn't know much about flatheads, but it was a pretty spooky place, you know, and I'm probably 8, 9 years old. And I would go in the rocks. They have huge boulders lining the banks. It's not a very big dam. It's got 2 sluice gates. You know, the average depth is between 7 and 12 feet. But once you get downriver, there's all kinds of wood, all kinds of oxbows and bends and a bunch of crazy stuff like that. But below the dam, they would have the lights on, and it would just mesmerize me when I was little. I would dream of giant catfish up there after I had seen my first one. And we were walking down to the dam, my parents and I, we got our Zebco 33s and our minnow buckets and our Zebco tackle boxes, you know, pretty much the junkiest, cheapest stuff you could get. And we were walking down there, and me being about 8 or 9 years old, a fella kind of comes towards us. He said, "You want to see something?" Which is kind of a weird thing, you know, old gray-haired fella, you know, kind of dirty, saying, "Hey, you want to see something?" And of course, I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a giant fish." And so, of course, I was excited to see it. My parents were a little bit, you know, standoffish, but he walked over and he popped the trunk on his old, I think it was one of those old Hornets. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was kind of a weird looking car. And he raised the trunk, and I looked in there, and there was this gigantic flathead. I mean, this thing wasn't bigger than me, but it just as well been.
We lost you there for a second.
Kind of zoned out there for a second.
Yeah.
Terrible signal. Of course. So anyway, I peered in at this giant brown and black mottled creature with this huge mouth. It was 39 pounds, I remember him saying. And I just thought it was the greatest thing in the world. So I become enthralled with flatheads. Kelly, I'm going to try to mess with my phone a little bit. I'll be right back.
Okay. That's fine.
Sometimes, believe it or not, I have to turn my Wi-Fi off out here. But anyway, I'll get back to the story. I'm enthralled with flatheads. And that's all I could think about.
Me.
So, wow, this signal. There we go. Okay. So I was the official bait catcher, of course, because my mom and dad started to get into wanting to catch flatheads, even though we weren't tackled up for it. We had no idea what the hell we were doing. We had 20-pound test, and Zebco 33s. And I think half of it, most of it was like 10-pound test. And we were stacking little 1-ounce egg sinkers on, and throwing into the rocks. And my mom would get one on every once in a while. We were using little green sunfish. My mom would get one on, and she's just a peach. And she would sit there for hours as one seesawed back and forth in the rocks. And we never got the chance really to land a good flathead. I mean, they had some on, but the biggest one I think I caught, it was like 6 pounds. So I decided when I was older, I was going to get a boat, and I was going to go up to that dam, and I was going to catch some flatheads, some big ones. And so I guess I should fast forward this story. So by now I'm still in high school, summertime. I've got a Chevette, and I took a 2-man plastic boat and I strapped it to the top. And it's got a little 36-pound thrust trolling motor and, the little bass seats. And here I am. I'm going to launch this thing, and I'm going to go up to that dam, and I'm going to tie off to the wall, and I'm going to catch me some flatheads. I wouldn't say that was probably the smartest thing in the world. I'd probably advise anybody against it, but I wasn't scared. So I'm probably 17, 18, 19, 20. I think I was probably 17 or 18. And so I go catch me some green sunfish. I've got some rod. There was an old HT Enterprises rod, which was kind of like it was supposed to be a catfish rod. And it was kind of like what you kind of find at Walmart these days. And I had a 733 hog and an 808, and I had mounted some rod holders on this plastic 2-man boat, and it's rocking and everything else, and I'm throwing. I'm just not having much luck. I think the biggest sinker you could get at that time was either way big or way small. So I'm stacking sinkers still, and I can't hold my baits right and all this stuff. So I think, okay, what if I put on a slip float, which I was actually pretty darn skilled at slip floats because I fished a lot of lakes and ponds, and I used the wind to do all this stuff. What if I do a slip float? Because I knew what was below the dam, and they have big obelisks. They have these big giant, and I didn't know how big they were at the time. I later found out they're 12 foot by 12 foot by 12 foot high, and they're like teeth, but they're way underneath the water because it's about 25, 30 foot up there. And of course, I opted for the less current side, but I ended up feeding. I took a larger slip float, and I put about 15 feet of line before I put the stop on there, and I had the little green sunfish, and I let this thing go along the wall, and luckily I was on they had one gate open coming on the left, and then because there's only 2 gates, and they had the side that I was on shut off. And so this thing goes along the wall. This is first cast, mind you. And it goes along the wall, and it gets stuck and starts to submerge a little bit. And I knew that I was on one of those obelisks. And it didn't take long till my Zebco 733 hog and my HT Enterprises goes down like this. I lock into it, and this is awesome. The greatest thing, the biggest fish I've ever had in my life. And I get it to the boat, and the slime coat on above the slip float in the pictures. And I've got some pictures because I actually snapped a couple pictures. It looks like it was an arrow. I mean, it looked like flights, and it was so thick. It was going down there. Just incredible stuff. It's not dark yet. It's kind of evening. Everything's rippling. And I see this behemoth of a flathead. And I couldn't tell you how big it was, but it literally kind of startled me. And I pulled up and broke the line right at the boat. Right between the slip float and that fish. And it broke my heart. And I think those 2 or 3 days, I did not get another shot at a big flathead. So let's fast forward again, because I didn't know of any other place. I mean, the Mississippi River actually is closer to me, but I had no idea. I had a little tiny boat at the time. I didn't know where else to go, but I knew that there was flatheads below Shelbyville Dam. That's all I knew. And there was no Google in those days. There was none of that stuff. So I pack up every summer as many chances I get. Well, I make a long story short, I had figured out that flatheads like current, and it was kind of a V8 moment. Like, I wish I had all the time back fishing the slack water, because you get very few chances at big flatheads in the slack water. Once I started to go to the fast water where it came towards me, cast up and get it hooked onto those obelisks, now it's on. Anything from 15 to 50 pounds. And so I started catching big flatheads that way. And fast forward a couple more years. Well, even back in those days, every once in a while, and the water down there is fairly clear because it comes off of the lake. And if the sun's just right, they have one sluice gate coming, and you can see all of the bait fish. And I used to call it the ring of death, because that's where all of the muskie would be. That's where all of the, the active flatheads during the day would be. And if you couldn't cast that far, and most of the time I couldn't, I just couldn't get to the what you call the ring of death. And you could go up on top of the dam. It's not that big of a dam, and look down and see the massive cloud of buffalo and carp and gar. And you could even pick out walleyes during the day, which walleyes usually don't come up in the light. But man, when the little shad were in there, and the big shad and the schools and all that stuff, it was pretty awesome. But I just couldn't get, so I got some longer rods, and I got some better slip floats, and I started using balloons and things like that. So I could actually drift a balloon into that ring of death up there. And almost every time it would come right, if it would get in there just enough, and there'd be a whole lot of slack, and it just get just right, it was fish on. So we had some pretty fantastic days. And so about the time I was about 23, we were up there around noon one day, and the bite was kind of slow. So I had a friend of mine with me. Matter of fact, he was Sean Liggett's best friend from high school. And his name was Brandon, and he was with me in my Carolina skiff at the time. Terrible boat, but I'll tell a story about that later. So we're positioned. I've got baits on one of the obelisks close to the wall up there about 65, 70 yards. And off in the right corner where the water was calm, it was pretty glassy up there, except for where the sluice gate was coming out, because it was August, pretty low. There wasn't a whole lot of flow. And I see this carp floating on top. And he's just kind of meandering around and kind of going in circles. He'd get just close enough to the ring of death, and then he'd cut back in. You could tell he was still alive, because he would get close enough to me. I would see the fins doing this. And he got close enough to me one time. He pretty much passed the boat. And I was a furniture builder at that time, and I was very used to measurements. I was used to, everything in 12 and 6-inch increments. I could tell you exactly how long that fish was. It was 28, 29 inches long, that carp was. And it had dribbled around and got caught in the backflow and went all the way up into the right corner and just dribbled across the base of the dam. And with the sun high in the sky, I looked over again, because I was interested, kind of, it was boring. We weren't getting any bites. I look over in that corner, and I see what I imagined was a gigantic yellow industrial garbage bag, because there wasn't anything that I would imagine would be that big besides somebody's trash. And I remember telling Brandon, I said, Brandon, can you believe that people just leave their trash or throw it in the water, or however it got in there? I said, this is ridiculous. I mean, this thing's, it's huge. And it's at such a distance, I can only see a huge amount of color. And there's actually some on top. But I'm starting to wonder, the longer I paid attention, I'm starting to wonder, why is it right next to that carp? Is it just caught right next to it? So I kind of paid attention to it. And it gets close. It kind of hovers around there for probably 2 or 3 minutes, and it got close to the ring of death again. And it starts meandering its way on that current break right beside the boat. And I look down, I look over, and there is a flathead underneath this, underneath this 30-inch carp, and his whiskers are sticking out from the tail to the nose, and they're sticking out. So this fish's head was 28 to 29 inches long. And I had just got done doing a big run of what we called deck benches, because we built furniture, that got kind of shipped all over the world. And a deck bench has a 72-inch back. And this fish was no less than 72 inches and 29 to 30 inches wide. And he literally, and I froze. I froze because I didn't have any rods that were still in the boat. They were all out. I so wanted to my heart's beating like this. Never seen anything like it in my life. And I said, Brandon, reach me a bait. I start reeling in the rod on the left, and I'm watching the fish the whole time. And I saw his eye go from trained on that carp to switch to me. And him and I made eye contact. And he submarined down like this before I could get that rod in. And I kid you not, we stayed there for 2 more days. We never left that damn wall for 2 days. I wanted to catch that fish so bad. I wanted to at least hook it. And Kelly, I've never seen anything like it since in my life.
I'll guarantee it's like one of those one of those once in a lifetime.
I've never seen a 6-foot flathead since.
No.
What's that, Kelly?
I said it's probably one of those once in a lifetime finds.
Oh, it had to be, because I'd been down there hundreds of times, and I've been down there hundreds of times since, and I had seen little ones, 35, 40 pounds at the surface every once in a while, but never a big yellow. And flathead eyes are not that big, but this one's eyes seemed like as big as mine, and I remember it still so vividly because it made such an impact on me that when I saw that fish so close, and I had time to stay, this wasn't a fleeting thing. I started to see it when it was 20 feet away. I knew it was a fish. As it got closer, and it was only moving at about this speed. It wasn't moving fast.
No,
it was moving really slow. So this fish appeared just underneath the surface in super clear water, underneath, and I ended up, after the fish submerged, after we all settled down, I ended up taking that carp and dip netting it just to make sure to measure it. And it was 28.5 inches long from nose to tail. And I've caught 70-pound flatheads. I've caught 80s, and I've caught some 90s. And none of them that I've had in my boat would clip 6 foot. They get close. And none of them would have a head that would be 29 inches wide. And I would disbelieve my estimation if that fish was like submerged and then the water, how it, does, makes things look bigger or smaller. But it having its lip right underneath that carp and its whiskers out in the water, it was all real time. But I've never seen it since.
Do you think it's still there, or do you think it's somebody's caught it?
I don't think anybody's caught it, because it would have definitely been the world record at the time, and probably the world record right now. Now, if it's been caught, it's been caught by a commercial guy or somebody that's running illegal nets and trout lines and whatever, and it just ended up on the table, and it just ended up as somebody's dumb redneck story.
Yeah.
So, and that happens, or maybe it died of old age. Who knows? Maybe it's still alive. Flatheads live a long time. Some of them do.
How old are you thinking that one is? But just by seeing it.
Say that again.
I said, how old are you thinking that flathead is estimated?
Well, flatheads have indeterminate growth, just like all fish, all freshwater fish, whatever. They keep growing the length of their life. But one thing about flatheads, we know they, at the size that they are compared to a blue, they're considerably older usually. Flatheads will grow fairly fast up to sexual maturity, and sometimes they get pretty big, at 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's been some of them when I was involved in those studies. Is there wind on this phone, Kelly?
Just a little bit, but not too bad. It's not too bad.
Just a little bit. Okay. As long as it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been involved in some of the growth studies, and the only true growth studies that there is the otolith bone. And I was involved in probably 6 different studies, 2 of which were on the Rock River, which that'll tell you, Rock River is a medium-sized river that goes into the Mississippi. So it's not a tiny river that takes them a long time. It's actually pretty big. Some 36-inch fish were as young as 3 to 5 years old, but some 36-inch fish were as much as 36 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of depends on that. Some of the 50-pound fish were considerably older than 50, and some of them were running about 28 to 30 years old. So that's a little bit difficult to tell, but my guess is a fish of that size, and I have thought about this in my head and tried to kind of rationalize it and kind of figure it out. I would guess that.
Oh, we lost him. All right, guys, hold on a second. We lost him. I'll let you see the fire for a minute until we get him back. Appreciate you all coming in here. Maurice, Matt, Minnow Dunkers. What's up, Rob? 2 old vets. Appreciate you all. 36 people in the house. P City. Here he is. Let's get him back in here. Good.
Yes, my terrible signal strikes again.
It's like they said.
Yeah.
It's like they said. It's not a good stream until we have signal issues. But hey,
right. So, I would suspect, and let me go back where I left off. I would suspect that fish is probably as old as when Model Ts were coming off the assembly line.
Yeah.
Now, do I hinge on that thing? No, I don't. I used to lose sleep over it. But it's been long enough ago that it's just a great story. So what's everybody got to say in chat? Any questions?
Roger says conspiracy. Said first Facebook, now Epic.
Conspiracy.
Yep, they're shutting down Facebook, and now they're trying to shut you down.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Minnow Dunkers in the house. He said appreciate me having you on. Oh, it's always a.
Hold on a second. I'm gonna go back to Wi-Fi and see if that works.
All right. But yeah, it's.
Sometimes I get lucky and I have a good signal out here, but evidently not today. Overcast seems to be the kiss of death for that.
Yeah. So they're all loving the story.
So, was everybody saying? Uh-oh.
Yeah, they're all saying loving the Flathead story, listening and cooking. Everybody's just listening, talking to each other. So, but nobody's really had any questions or nothing.
Kelly, I'm going to the office or I'm going in the kitchen, one of the two.
Okay. While you're doing that, I am going to put some more wood on the fire.
Because this just isn't working.
Yeah. So I'm gonna mute.
Darn Wi-Fi. Yeah, I tried. All right, is that better? Say something, Kelly. Hello.
All right, now I'm back.
All right. So the signal seems to be better. Except
Oh,
I'm
yes.
going to have to hold the phone the whole. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay.
As long as you don't bump it. As long as you don't bump it. All right, there you go. Tim Molina says put more wood on the fire. There you go. I got plenty of wood for it.
There you go.
We got Haz in the house. We've got Mark from Catfishing Crappie. Appreciate it. We got 40 people in the house.
Nice. All right, so raise your hand if you want to hear the story of the #1 top 10 anchor of all time.
All right, give me thumbs up if you want to hear that. We got Roger Anderson in the house. Mr. Duggar's in here. 23 thumbs up already. Appreciate that, Mark. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Yep. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Yep.
All right. So.
Oh, before we get to that, we do have one question.
Sure.
P City Smitty wants to know, how do I catch big flatheads?
Pretty much keep doing what he's doing, except for what he needs to find is he needs to find that cover that holds flatheads year round. Now, he's on the East Coast, which usually means it, even in the upper area where he's at it, the rivers don't usually freeze, as I remember. So, but flatheads will still go on into some sort of suspended animation. They don't go in like full wintering mode, but if you're going to find the truly giant flatheads, you're going to have to find spots that are acceptable to them year round. So, I've got summer spots, and then I've got spots that are better in the spring, but my truly good spots, at least back when I used to catch giant flatheads, something is, and that's a story for another day, but something has happened to a lot of my really, really big flatheads. Whether commercial fishing did something to them or whether the floods kind of sent them upriver or downriver. But I used to be able to pretty much catch 50+ pound fish at will off of 6 or 7 really epic spots. And now some of those spots have been degraded. They're not as good as they used to be. They've lost a little bit of holding power because, the drop is subtle now. The spots have filled in. I used to have a spot called Deepwater Wood where the point of an island, it used to be off the main channel. The point of an island, you'd go just a little bit off and it'd be 4 foot of water, pretty fast water actually, because it was.
Hold on a second, guys.
So anyway, let me describe that. You got your main channel, and then you got the point of an island here, and just on this offshoot, it used to shoot from about 6.5, 7 foot of water straight down into about 25. And then it flattened out just a little bit, and there was 2 giant sycamore trees caught in the bottom of this thing. And it rounded the corner and got even deeper than that. So then there was also another chute that came, and it came off of 4 foot of water and joined into that. And it dribbled from about 4.5 foot of water down into 15 on a shelf where some other wood was caught. So you got 2 main currents coming into this, joining in about a 20-foot spot with 2 gigantic sycamores stuck right in there. And I could actually get in there and target either numbers or giant fish. And you'd have to kind of feel around and make sure that you put the bait close enough to them, because you couldn't always guarantee by fishing at night that you could guarantee a big fish coming up, because half the time, or probably even more than that, they would go downstream into that deeper water before they came up shallow and just started running around. So I kind of learned how to be able to figure out where the big ones were according to how the current was running at that time. But that spot now is 4 foot deep. The trees are still there, but there's only the tops of them sticking out, and the whole thing has been destroyed by a flood. But anyway, you would have to find spots that are going to hold flatheads spring, summer, winter, and fall, because those are the spots that the big flatheads end up dominating. And that's probably the best way I can describe it to you. And I'll just give you a couple examples. Deepwater Wood was a good wintering area. It was a good spring area. It was a very good summer, fall area. I mean, it held bait fish. It held a good cover. It held all, acceptable depth for every time of year, and it was a really good spot. Also, there was a couple other spots. One I called Bubba Fish. Another one I called, this and that and the other. I got a whole bunch of nicknames for them. But truly big fish don't visit spots that aren't that great. They visit them. Sorry, they don't live there. So to up your odds, you got to look at a lot of the river. You got to look at you got to kind of pick that combination of the right current plus the right cover plus the right depth. Some spots are going to hold fish in lower water when they're moving, especially in the pre-spawn, but they're not going to hold fish in the dead of summer. They're not going to hold, or they may not hold fish in the fall when they're getting ready for that winter transition, or that whether you're fishing winter or they just go into a homeostasis and they somewhat are just more lethargic, sit there, but then they have periods of activity. I don't know, because I haven't fished your rivers out there. But, if you go to rivers like the Rock, you go to rivers like the Kaskaskia, you go to rivers like the Mississippi, the Des Moines, any of those major tributaries of the Mississippi and the Mississippi itself, you're going to have to find areas that they're almost like they get 4 stars, not just one, because if they can't winter there, you take away a star. If they can't, if it get in high water, if the bottom current gets too fast and there's not enough cover, take away a star. If it's too shallow of a transition area where, there's just enough current at a certain level, but yet they're just not going to hold there all the time, might as well take off another star. So how I found these spots is I would fish as many spots as I could, and especially in everything but pre-spawn, but also pre-spawn. I would start eliminating spots that I caught fish less than 40 pounds on. So then I would start to revisit, but I couldn't eliminate those unless I fished them a season or two. So it to form that big fish milk ground, it does take a long time. And maybe your river doesn't have the right combination to hold them all the time. Maybe they're a transient population, they move here and they move there. So if they're doing that, it is really difficult. But I would say, if I was doing it on your river, from what I've seen, if I was going to set out to catch the biggest catfish in the Schuylkill River or whatever the river, the Potomac, any of those places, I would start hitting it pretty hard, and I would probably not use more than 50% cut bait. Now, I'm not saying that cut bait isn't the right thing to use on your river, but to test those waters, I'd want to use live baits, because I want to see the aggressive fish. I want to be able to make a fish bite by putting it in its face instead of just seeing if they're active. And then I would start to keep track. I went upriver, I went medium river, and I went downriver. One thing I know about tidal rivers, and I don't think your river that you fish flatheads is a tidal river. I do know that the bigger flatheads, out of all the guys I talk to that fish tidal rivers, the bigger ones come from the mid to the lower stretch, almost to the too high salinity count for them to even exist down there. And it has always surprised me of how big a flathead will haunt those lower stretches in a relatively short tidal river. The Altamaha, the Potomac, the James, all these rivers that just, leach out into the ocean. It surprises me how much brackish water they can actually tolerate.
Muskrat's got a question for you. He says, Epic, what phase are these fish in right now? It seems too warm for transition, but not cool enough to start feeding up.
Yeah, this is what I call the true dog days. This isn't a transition. This is a limbo stage. Most of our waters are low, and they're just sort of stuck. They're just sort of, they're not really traveling yet. Like even mine, I've got a multitude of big fish in my area, as you guys notice by what we've been catching in our lives. But it is not one of those things where I can go on these days, I'm just like everybody else. I got to work. I don't guide anymore. So I'm not on the water every day. I'm stuck at the mercy of the fish. So Sean and I have been down there for like 4 weeks in a row. We've seen a massive amount of big fish. We've seen them just sort of milling around underneath the boat. Here, if I was the fish finder, here you got the top, here you got and then the bottoms down here. We got like fish that are this wide. That's why I've been calling them hippopotamuses running around on the bottom. Here they come. They got yellow. They got the blue coating. They got the yellow. They got the orange, and they got the dark red. I mean, these things are massive. And they're probably pretty much like what we've been catching, the bigger fish, 60, 70, 80 pounds. Some of them are probably bigger, but we've been at the mercy of these fish. They're kind of stuck. They haven't really migrated up. They haven't really migrated down. They're kind of loose. So if they're on the move, if you're fishing below a dam, a lot of times if they're on the move in a general trend upstream, you can kind of pretty much say, hey, I can go upstream and I can get to a travel. Just say they're coming in and it's 50, 60 foot of water and you've got an incline like this, they're going to hover around in here. And if they're active, they're going to find your bait, especially if you're parked up here throwing baits down into 50, 60 foot of water. But presenting baits is what we've been doing to them. And they're just not, just a small percentage of baits. Let me turn that back on. A small percentage of baits are being eaten. It's not like a normal situation. Even this time of year, if we had a little bit more water, which gets them excited a little bit more. Hold on, let me. Which gets them excited a little bit more, and then I can expect more of those big marks, those big hippopotamuses down there to eat, and that's one of the reasons I'm going to talk about my number one top 10 anchor here in a little bit after we get done with these questions, because I expect almost every time if I go into a situation where the current's decent, and I anchor up and I got the right baits, I expect a lot more than one or two fish to be biting. Because I've been doing it so long, I know what can happen. I know what lives there. I know it can happen, and I expect these fish to bite. And I've even proved it to myself. We've made sure to go get moon eye, which is usually the trigger bait for them. If you can't get them to go on carp, you can't get them to go on quillback, you can't get them to go on sucker, sometimes they will eat moon eye. There's no doubt about it. But that hasn't been the case. Catfishing crappie, Mark. I caught a big 11-inch bullhead today. It's too late in the season on the Fox River to use it for flatheads? Absolutely not. This is probably one of the better times to use it. The summertime. Now I would say that I like I like bullheads as a pre-spawn flathead bait, but there's nothing wrong with using an 11-inch bullhead right now on flatheads, especially if you can predict where bigger flatheads are going to be. Now, if you're just willy-nilly throwing it, at least a bullhead, you're going to be able to throw it 40 times before it wears out. So, any bullheads right now would be worth it. Minnow Dunker says, what's been the best bait for you lately, Tim? Well, we've had a smattering of results from as far as big fish. The rod that got ripped out of the boat was a white bass head. We've caught some good fish on white bass bodies, but for the most part, and I've caught some on quillback heads, and we've caught some on stuff, but for the most part, it's been the big red horse suckers. And they're not showing a preference right now for me putting them in the live well and keeping them fresh alive. They're not showing any preference for that. I'll throw stuff that I've cut up that morning, put in bags, and they're nice and kind of getting a little slimy. They're not soft by any means, but they've just turned to that, just to where they're starting to degrade, and they smell more, there's no doubt. But I've seen it where if you're not throwing completely fresh, you might as well go home. But I haven't seen that this year. I haven't seen it at all. We can throw a big sucker donkey head that's a day old right next to a very fresh one that has come out of the live well, and they're not showing a preference to it, because that's one of the things that I've trained myself to notice. I mean, I'm constantly pitting I'm constantly trying to figure out what the fish are telling me. So, I'm not willy-nilly throwing certain baits. But in the last 2 weeks, I haven't even, like this last time, I didn't even bring the cooler full of water. That's another 300 pounds we don't need in the boat. I got to run a whole bunch of stuff. I cut them up that morning. We didn't have to cut them up as we were going. There was a few that I cut up, but and I just left them what I call on the hoof. I just left them in the cooler in plastic bags so they don't get wet. They're kind of marinating in their own sauce and their own guts, and I really like it when it's like that, because it's really less of a pain in my ass.
I think we have all the questions have been taken care of.
All right.
So if
So let's
everybody's
tell the
ready,
story.
we
How
are ready
much time do
for
we got left, Kelly?
We are good.
How much time do we got left?
However long you want it.
All right. I know you like to keep this close to an hour. How long has it been?
It's 47 minutes right now.
I don't think I can tell this in 10 minutes, but I might be able to tell it in 20.
That's fine.
All right.
If you can do it in 20, if you can do it in 30, that's fine. We'll just do it till you got to the end of it.
All right. Let's set this stage here.
All right. What's our title of our story now? Just the top
number
10?
One top 10 anchor.
All right. And I approve this.
As long as we're telling campfire stories, I might as well tell the ones that are the hardest to believe, but they are all true. Because I don't like to stretch fish stories. I just like to tell them like they are. But let me set this stage for you. This was 2007, August. Low water. It had just come down. Buddy of mine, who's a school teacher that I've been fishing with for years, by the name of John Weir, and another one by the name of Dustin Dodd, which you guys got to meet Dustin Dodd in a live. He didn't say much, but these guys are pretty. John Weir is an accomplished all-around fisherman. He fishes up towards Chicago, and I actually met him when I was doing seminars up in the Chicagoland area, and he was a very interesting guy to talk to. Not only that, he had the time, he had the inclination, and he wasn't scared. He didn't care if it was hot. He didn't care if it was cold. That's one thing. I mean, it has not been easy for me to have good fishing partners because I'm so rough on a lot of this stuff. I don't want to go 3 hours south and have somebody go, dude, I got to go mow the yard. Or my wife wants, if I'm fishing with somebody on a weekend and he gets like 5 calls from his wife wanting to know where in the hell he's at, or having to go home, or he's got to mow the yard or do some honey-do list, he doesn't go with me anymore. That's over. If he's worried about rain, if he gets too cold and I hear a bunch of complaints, it's over. Done. No more. Yeah, we don't go on epic catfishing trips. If if a guy can't keep his wits about him, and he can't get catfish psycho like I can. And believe me, it took a long time to find people that could hang, because that just, Kelly was just 3 years old in 2007. Yeah, okay. Solo, that puts it in perspective.
No,
All
I
right.
was
So,
not. I was not. I was in college.
okay, college. All right. So, and back in those days, I was worse than I am now. I mean, now I'm at least seasoned enough to know that I'm not going to turn a bite around in a day or two, because I used to think that, I get down south, I get down on the big water, and I'm doing everything in my power to get these bites to turn around. Or maybe it was fantastic the first day and I'm expecting it to last all week, or I'm expecting to, do this or do that. And I've thrown 80 pounds cement cinder blocks because I lost my anchor on the first anchor of the trip in a 7-day trip, and basically wore my hands raw because I wasn't going home. I mean, there's no way. And there was no give up in me. And once in a while, I've even had my catfish psycho friends just finally lose it after 4 days and go, 5 days, I don't want to be here anymore. As the rain's going down the crack of your back the whole time for 3 days, and then we had to go get boots, and we had to go buy frog togs and this and all that stuff just to make this stuff happen. And I, because I've been able to pull it out, I've been able to take a bad situation and make it good so many times. I have the ultimate expectation that I'm going to be able to win this thing, even if if everything's against you, I can still win it. I still believe that, and it happens. It happened the other night on the live. It was a horrible bite. We changed our stars by going upstream and getting into a different situation, even though it was generally the same. But back in the day when I knew less, I would try other goofy stuff. I would try for blues too shallow, and I would just start kind of running amok. But by the time 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007 happened, I was pretty grounded in what I needed to keep doing. But I would figure out, okay, if they're not doing it here, we need to. I figured out the current equation a little bit more. Okay, so to get back to the 2007 number one anchor of all time, it was a tough bite, believe it or not. We went downriver. We're actually above St. Louis, where you guys watch us in our lives, and we launched. We launched in the same spot that Sean and I launched, and it was hot. It was kind of pre-front is what it was. So I mean, we got a few clouds, but it's generally bluebird skies, and that has never really been a great situation. High pressure and bluebird skies isn't what a guy really looks for to go catch monsters and multiples of them. But of course, we're kind of stubborn, and I said, okay, let's go down and fish the wing dikes. We looked at wing dikes. We looked at other things. We can't even hardly mark a fish. And back in those days, you could check how many CFMs were coming out, but they wouldn't really tell you what was happening days before that. So, and I'm pretty sure in 2007, I still had a flip phone or a bar phone. I can't remember, just like the brick. It was only about that long and about that wide. So that really wasn't that much help.
Is that prepaid or something? Those?
No, they weren't prepaid. They were my local. It was Illinois Valley Cellular at the time. It was just a kind of a local cell phone place, and you could pick the $5 a month phone, or you could pick the $15 a month phone. Let's just say.
Yeah. I remember those. They were so bulky. So bulky.
Yeah,
of a
they
phone.
were, but by this time it would fit in your back pocket. It was only about that long and about that wide, and it just had open buttons. So you were constantly butt dialing people, constantly.
Oh, kind of like the Blackberries they had, because they were open face with all the buttons.
not even close to it. This thing looked like okay, so when you get done here, just Google image like a year 2005 Nokia cell phone. That's what.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, we had gotten down there. We could, bait was almost impossible. And back in those days, moon eye was pretty easy, but somehow they disappeared. Bridge abutments with decent current, and then, you know, everybody notices that I throw behind barges at night. We could not find bait. We got out there pretty early. We couldn't find any bait of any consequence because I didn't used to bring bait back then because you didn't really need to. Because, you know, 99 times out of 10, you go and you get giant moon eye, you know, this big, cut him in half, and it was awesome. We ended up getting one Asian carp to jump in the boat. And so I cut this thing into strips, and here we were. We fished a couple hours. And we were looking in that same general area as Sean got his soul back in. And that's always been a good traditional area. And actually on the other side of the river back in those days was good, but it was good for numbers of 20 and 30 pound fish. And we popped in over there and we caught a few fish that were, you know, 30, 35 pounds. Not impressive to us at the time. Still isn't. But by that time we had grown past, you know, 15s and 20s and being real happy with that. And 30s was all right. But it really wasn't by no means any sort of barn burner as far as a good bite. We were spending 15, 20, 25 minutes to get a bite. And to me, even at that time, even at that stage of my life, you know, if you're only catching 2 or 3 fish on an anchor and the biggest one's 30 pounds, I was looking for something better. So we had bopped over there. We bopped, you know, over to the deeper 35, 40 foot of water, which isn't all that deep as far as blue cats goes, but it's pretty deep for that range. And so I was talking to John. I said, John, I'm getting a little bit sick of this, you know, really crappy bite. And he goes, well, yeah. He goes, of course, there's no current. And if you knew John, it's kind of funny because he's, you know, we're driving the boat, and I've always been a guy that says, all right, you go find it. You find us some fish. You know, John had been fishing with me long enough. And so he's kind of tooling around. He's not really seeing what he wants to see. He goes, huh? He goes, yep. Let's go to the dam. I said, all right. So I jumped in the helm and I just fired up to the dam. We started looking. And immediately I mark a hippopotamus. I said, okay, I marked some in the 60 foot of water that you can't fish because when they, you know, blow out the lock, which is humongous, this thing's like, I don't know how long it is, 1,700 feet long or something crazy like that. There's so much water coming out that all you'll do is turn sideways and snag up. So you got to be above it. So we went above that, and the water was cooking.
Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
What's that?
I said, I don't know what's going on. My signals just went kaput. So hold on just a second. Yeah, my fire signal. Go ahead and talk. My fire signal went away, so I'm going to try to get it real quick.
So, I mean, this water's cooking, and it's hot out. I mean, it's hot. And John is a bigger guy. Shoot, at the time, he's about 6'4", 330. He was an ex college baseball player. His brother, about 6'7", 250, and he was actually he played for the Mariners for a while. And so these guys aren't sissies. So anyway, it's just John with me. We end up going. It's just just getting to be dark, and we throw the moon eye out. And we didn't have the kind of rigs that I've got now. We didn't have surge rods. We had more like graphite type. I mean, they were good. There were some Berkeley E-Cats. We had some, you know, Garcia 7000s. We had some other things like that. But we didn't have anything like you could reel a grouper in with, like what I've got now, the surge rods and those big saltwater reels and stuff like that. I think John brought one coffee can. We used to call it a coffee can reel because he used to go down to Florida, and he said, you know, anything he had for freshwater, they just spool you down there. And he used to go tarpon fishing and shark fishing and stuff like that. But anyway, he brought a couple of his rigs, and you know, Dustin brought a couple of his, and his was more like what it was kind of high end at the time. It was kind of more like a bumping rod. And we ended up putting his bumping rod on the right side of the boat in about 32 foot of, I mean, burning ass current. Dangerous water style current. Like one of our first videos when that water was really rushing. Put that in the down rod. I didn't have donkey weights at the time, so I'm casting. So we had to anchor up as tight as we could, and I was on a full cast. I was on a full cast with 5 ounces and just 6-inch strips, only this big around, of Asian carp. And so I'm doing a full cast just to get it on the bottom and letting line out. So we're almost 75 yards from our targets, and I had set the rods in the holders. It was basically the same. It was a different boat, but it was basically the same setup I have now. So you got the 2 up rods, which we put down, and then you've got the 2 corners, which you cast out a little bit, 22.5 degrees, but they wouldn't stick, not with 5 ounces. And even a streamline bait, they wouldn't stick. So we ended up sticking with 4 rods, actually 3 rods out the back, and 2 straight down. Now, the straight down, luckily, we stacked a couple of 5s. So we had 10 to 15 ounces of weight. Not really cool, but we did it. We were still using circle hooks at the time. I mean, I think the Team Catfish stuff came out, but I think they were Daiichi Circle Chunk Lights at the time before the Team Catfish came out. They were 7/0s, the red ones. And so we put the baits out, and I did my clap because I was pretty happy with the situation that I was seeing. And we were talking, and a rod goes down. So I grab the rod, and I get it in at fairly short order because it was about 40 pounds. While I was holding this fish up, another rod goes down, and it just starts peel and drag and peel and drag and peel and drag. So John, I picked the rod up and I hand it over to John. Another rod goes down. I hand that rod to Dustin. Another rod goes down. So we've got three monster fish on right now. They're not 40. These are giants. A 40, you tap it around and kind of pull it down and kind of pull it down. These things just did the one tap, the big inhale, and then they just went straight down like that. So Dustin's fighting a fish, John's fighting a fish, I'm fighting a fish all at the same time. We still got a rod in the water. So I slam mine back in, and I try to get the other line out. And that line gets what I thought was snagged. Well, Dustin's fish gets wrapped up in the line that was out. I've got mine going on the left, so I slam it back in the rod holder. John's still fighting his on the outside, and then all of a sudden, that rod that I thought was snagged, Dustin gets into it. He's got it on the top of the water, and it's a 70. And it's going like this, like a big helicopter, because it's starting to wrap around the line. So I grab the other line like this, and then all of a sudden, it's pulling different. So I'm like, hold it. We got 4 fish on 4 rods here. And Dustin's like, what? So I'm like, okay, Dustin. I'm like, John's fighting a fish. I'm like, let anchor rope out. So I get anchor rope out, and I'm peeling my line, going down the line like this. I get Dustin's 70. Actually, it was bigger than 70. It was probably 75 or 80. I get the net under it, and I feel the line underneath his, because now the pressure's off, and it's got a giant fish. And so I start trying to pull it in by hand so I could get his out of it, and it snaps the line. And that was 50-pound test at the time with 80-pound, whatever. And so I've still got a fish on over here. So I start getting into my fish. Dustin's got it. Gosh dang it. This thing just times out all the time. Dustin's got his. His is in the boat. John's still fighting the other one, and John's up there sweating. I mean, sweating because it's like 85 degrees at like 7 o'clock at night. So I get mine in, and it's somewhere in the territory of 80 pounds. Dustin's somewhere in the territory of 80 pounds, and John's still fighting. So we get the pictures, we get our 2 fish released, and John's still fighting this fish, and it's still way back. He's had it underneath the boat 4 times, and every time he gets it up, it just goes down. It's going down again, and I'm like, John, because John starts cramping up, and John's like this big athlete. You know, he's retired. He's a school teacher now, so I'm not saying he's still lifting weights every morning and eating Wheaties, but he's starting to huff and puff and everything else. And he's got the rod. I'm like, John, you just got to use the fulcrum. He's like, no. He goes, seriously, I want somebody else to take this fish. I said, what? He goes, no, seriously, I have this on film. This isn't just my recollection. I have it on film that I'm having a hard time transferring it because I'd love to show this part. Because Dustin brought his home video camera that was like, you know, weighed like 12 pounds. And he's trying to film, and John's telling him, shut that camera off, you know, because it's getting in his eyes. He's got all the light. It's just complete pandemonium in the boat. And so John, he's like, no, seriously, I want somebody else to take this fish. And so I'm like, okay. And so, and John's on the front deck. He's on the front deck with his feet on the side of the gunnel because this fish is ripping out drag so hard. It's ripping out drag. And he gains a little bit, and it comes back, and it gets up in the water column, and it goes down. And so in the video, I'm kind of making fun of John because, you know, I'm, you know, captain. I was 32 years old, in great shape, kind of cocky. And I'm like, John, you just got to use the fulcrum. You know, so so I'm down in the John position. I got the rod between my legs, and I got my hand high on it like this, and I'm cranking down, and I'm just easing that fish. And this is really before I learned how to keep these fish along the bottom, and I kind of learned that day, because every time that fish would get high in the water column, it would just start peeling drag. And I mean, it would peel. It'd peel 50 yards, 60 yards. And John would have to start all over again. So I'm up there. I got my feet. I got my feet on the gunnel, and we're all sweating. I mean, we're sweating our balls off. And so I'm holding high on the rod like this, and I'm cranking it down, and it gets to the surface, and none of us can believe it. This is the biggest thing we've ever seen in our lives. We're like, oh my God. We're like, holy moly. And somehow John and Dustin ended up getting a net under this thing. And this is a mega fish. We did not have anything to weigh it, but the length on the fish, and we measured it. You remember the super monster that I have on YouTube?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was 62 inches. This one was 65 inches and bigger around by a ways. It was one of those bigger bulbous fish. It was like this. We sat that thing in John's lap, and John's giant, and the tail literally flops over the steering wheel and covered it. It was the craziest thing ever. But we're not done yet. Finally, we take a couple of pictures, and the down rod that Dustin had brought, we just released the big super monster fish, and John's in front of this thing, and it goes down, straight down rod, all the way down in the water, and just starts pulling drag. So John picks it up, and he's mad by this point. John's like angry because Dustin brought like a bumping rod to the big show. You know, this is one of those, you know, more graphite things. And he's like, oh, there's nothing I can do with this fish. I pull like this, and it's bending it's bending from the handle all the way down in the water.
Oh, had no backbone. Oof.
No backbone whatsoever.
Oh.
And, you know, at least we got a few rods with some decent backbone.
Yeah.
That we'd been fighting fish on. But by this time, it's on Dustin's what did he call it? He called it something like his wimp noodle, something like that. I remember. And so they're kind of going back and forth. Dustin's got his camera out, filming John. John's angry, and John goes, "Get that fucking camera out of my face!" And so, so Catfish Hero Sean has heard that. And he's seen it, and so that's why when in Dangerous Waters, I came up to Sean.
Hold on, guys.
Uh-oh. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay. Hold on.
I'm gonna put the fire pit in the picture.
All right. Now I'm up.
All right. I'll let everybody see the fire pit real quick. All right. Okay. I'm gonna switch you back. All right. And all right. Good. Go.
So by the time we started doing YouTube, Sean had heard that story from the other guys that were in the boat at that time. Especially John. He fished with John a lot. He fished with Dustin a couple times. He fished with me. And he had heard that, "Get that camera out of my face." So when I came up to Sean on Dangerous Waters, that's exactly why he did that. Because we were in the epic spot. He was fighting, an epic fish. Yeah, it ended up being about a 50-pound fish. But anyway, so John's got another 100-pound fish on. And so we boat that thing, and it's like, so we've already got one that's like 130, maybe even more than that, probably 140. We don't know. We got a 70, and then now we got a fish we think is like 100. It ends up being, we get that in, it's like 90. So we've got 200-pounders. Oh, sorry. It was over 100, so we got 200-pounders on. We got like 80, we got a 40. So that right there is like 4 or 5 fish that are just super whoppers. And we ended up, and I could make this story last forever, but we ended up catching generally 4 fish over 80 on one anchor. And 2 of those were over 100. And we ended up catching a 60, a 70. It was great. I'd have to resort to my notes. But it was crazy, and everybody's like, "What's the top 10 anchor thing about?" And I haven't gotten close to that one exactly, but that last live wasn't too bad.
No.
An 80, an 85, and a 70. Now, if that one right there would have followed up with maybe a 50 or a 60 and maybe a couple 40s, it would have kind of rose to like 2 or 3 on my top 10 anchors. And believe it or not, I've got a couple of, which I'll have to save that for another day. I've got a couple of anchors that Flatheads made it onto my top 10 anchors. And I will tell that one day. And they were all Flatheads.
Lee Evans, that sneeze was not me. That was my little girl. Because she's sitting, I don't know if you can see her in the other camera. She's sitting right off to the edge over there. But that was some, guys, appreciate you all coming in at 41. We stayed in the 40s pretty much the whole entire time.
Nice.
Appreciate y'all coming in here. If you have not hit the hook set button, make sure you do that. We're going to have more of these shows coming soon. Because this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. Me and Tim's been talking about it. I think it's interesting just to have some stories going on and doing it by the fire, which I'll have this going every time we do it, and especially this time of year, it's going to be. I love to say it's going to be epic of these stories, definitely every time. And Tim, we definitely have you back on here. Because I know you've got more and more stories. Oh yeah,
maybe not all as fantastic as that. I've got some dumb stories. I got some stories of that should probably never be told, but I might tell them in a certain way.
Guys,
we'll
this is what
see.
this is for. This is that show to be able to do it. It's to be able to just come on and tell all kinds of stories. If it's funny, it's serious, it's sad, dumb, whatever anybody wants to do. That's what this is for. But appreciate everybody coming in here. Make sure you hit that thumbs up before you leave. If you want to see more of this show, definitely leave me a message. Leave me a comment. And if you want Tim back on here the next show on this, before we get anybody else, then let me know. If not, if you want to be on the show, tell us a awesome story, then let me know that too. So, but Tim, appreciate it, man. Definitely.
Well, we'll tell some Sean stories next time.
All right, cool.
We'll
cool.
We'll get into the 2010s and above.
Gotcha. But appreciate it. Appreciated you all coming in here. So this is the conclusion to Fish Tales by the Fire. We will see you on the next show. Epic, Tim, hold off just a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit after the show.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Appreciate it. We'll see you all on the next one.